The crisp autumn air bit at Eleanor's cheeks as she stepped out of the imposing glass tower that had been her professional world for 30 years. Behind her lay the polished marble lobby, the silent, efficient elevators, the hushed corridors of the university's esteemed history department. In her hand, she clutched a worn leather briefcase. But it felt lighter than usual, less weighted with the gravitas of academic papers and committee reports, heavier with the unexpected emptiness of the last few weeks. First had come the divorce, a quiet, almost polite unraveling of a 25-year marriage to her husband, Robert. There had been no dramatic fights, no blazing rows, just a slow, sad drift apart, like two boats slipping their moorings in the night. They were still fond of each other, still respected one another, but the shared dreams had faded, replaced by separate lives lived under the same roof. The lawyer had called it amicable, a word that felt far too cool for the quiet ache in Eleanor's chest. Sitting in Mr. Henderson's sterile office, signing the papers, the end of her marriage felt less like a storm and more like a slow, steady leak that had finally emptied the reservoir of their shared life. Then had come the news from the university. The grant, the one she had poured years of research into. The one that would have funded her magnum opus, a sweeping history of forgotten women in colonial America. It hadn't come through. A lack of perceived contemporary relevance, the rejection letter had stated, a phrase that felt like a dismissal not just of her work, but of her life's passion. At 62, with her children grown and her marriage ended, the loss of her academic purpose left her feeling adrift. Her days, once rigidly structured by lectures, archives, and research, now stretched before her, vast and undefined. She retreated to her quiet suburban home, the silence amplifying the feeling of being lost. Her children, bless them, called and visited, offering comfort and concern, but they had their own busy lives, their own families. Eleanor smiled, assured them she was fine, and then sat alone in rooms that felt too large, surrounded by books that no longer seemed to hold all the answers. It was during this time of quiet reckoning that a letter arrived from a small law firm in a town she barely knew existed. Meadow Creek. It was from a distant cousin she had met only once as a child, the executor of the estate of her late Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol, a woman Eleanor remembered only vaguely, a spinster who had lived a quiet life somewhere in the countryside. Eleanor had assumed the inheritance would be a small sum of money, a family heirloom perhaps. Instead, the letter stated she was the sole inheritor of Aunt Carol's property. Inheritance seemed like just another complication in a life that felt increasingly out of her control. She called the lawyer, a kind-sounding Mr. Peterson, and arranged to visit Meadow Creek to discuss the estate and, she assumed, arrange for the property's sale. The drive to Meadow Creek took nearly 2 hours, leaving behind the familiar highways and suburbs for winding country roads, past fields of ripening corn and barns weathered by time. The town itself was small, nestled beside a gently flowing river, a cluster of older buildings centered around a small square. It was quaint, certainly, but seemed a world away from the academic circles she was used to. When she finally found the address listed in the letter, 14 Maple Lane, Eleanor was surprised. She had expected a house, perhaps a modest cottage. Instead, she found a large, sturdy building that looked like an old schoolhouse or perhaps a small public library. A sign out front, slightly faded, read, "The Havenwood Community Hub." Confusion washed over her. This wasn't a private residence. As she parked the car, the front door of the building opened and people began to emerge. Women carrying canvas bags, elderly men walking with canes, a group of teenagers laughing. They didn't look like people leaving a private estate. They looked like people leaving, well, a community center. Eleanor walked hesitantly towards the entrance. The air was filled with a gentle murmur of voices, the scent of brewing coffee, and something else she couldn't quite place. A feeling of warmth, of shared purpose. She found Mr. Peterson inside, a cheerful man with a shock of white hair. He greeted her warmly. "Eleanor, welcome to Meadow Creek. Welcome to the hub." "Mr. Peterson," Eleanor began, still bewildered. "There must be some mistake. This address, it's a community center, not a house." "Oh, there's no mistake," he said, his eyes twinkling. This is Aunt Carol's property. Or it was. She left it to you, just as the will states. He gestured around the bustling main room, where people were chatting, reading, playing board games. This is her legacy, Eleanor. She didn't just own the building. She created what happens inside it. Mr. Peterson explained that Aunt Carol, a woman of quiet means but immense spirit, had recognized the needs of the struggling town. She had used her inheritance years ago to buy the old schoolhouse, preventing it from being sold off for commercial development. She had poured her time, her energy, and her remaining savings into transforming it into a multi-purpose community hub. It housed a small free clinic, staffed by visiting doctors, a literacy program, a food pantry, a children's art corner, and a general meeting space for town residents. Aunt Carol herself had been the heart of the place, coordinating volunteers, organizing services, a tireless force for good. When Aunt Carol passed, Mr. Peterson said, his voice softening, the town lost its anchor. The hub is struggling, Eleanor. We have wonderful volunteers, truly dedicated people, but we need someone to lead, to coordinate, to keep things running smoothly. It's a lot for the volunteers to manage on top of everything else. And the visiting doctor, he had to move away last month. The clinic is closed for now. It's been hard on everyone. Eleanor listened, her mind reeling. This was so far removed from the quiet, scholarly life she had known. An inheritance, yes, but not of dusty furniture or stocks and bonds, but of responsibility, of a community in need. She spent the next 2 days in Meadow Creek, not discussing the sale of the property, but walking the streets, talking to the people. She visited the small general store, the bakery, the riverbank. She met some of the volunteers at the hub. Martha, a retired teacher who ran the literacy program. George, a handyman who kept the building in repair. Brenda, who managed the food pantry. They spoke of Aunt Carol with reverence, of the hub with fierce pride, and of their current struggles with weary determination. Eleanor, the historian, used to studying the past, found herself unexpectedly captivated by the present, by the tangible, immediate needs of this community and the quiet strength of the people who were trying to meet them. Her academic life, with its focus on abstract ideas and historical analysis, suddenly felt distant, almost irrelevant. What was the relevance of a forgotten colonial woman compared to the very real need for a doctor in this town, for a warm place for seniors to gather, for a place where children could learn to read? Mr. Peterson, sensing her internal struggle, was patient. There's no pressure, Eleanor, he said kindly. It's your property now. You can sell it, do whatever you wish. But Aunt Carol, she hoped whoever inherited it would see its value, not just as property, but as a living thing. Eleanor returned home, the quiet of her suburban house even more profound than before. She looked at her books, her research notes, the carefully curated artifacts of her academic career. They felt dusty, cold. She thought of the warmth of the hub, the easy laughter of the volunteers, the hopeful faces of the people she'd met. She thought of Aunt Carol, the woman who had built something real and lasting, not with grand theories, but with simple kindness and hard work. The decision didn't come easily. It meant stepping completely outside her comfort zone, abandoning the only identity she had known for decades. But the thought of the hub closing, of the clinic remaining empty, of the light going out in that building, it settled in her heart with a weight far heavier than any grant rejection. Her life felt empty, she realized, because it lacked purpose that extended beyond herself. Aunt Carol's legacy wasn't just a building. It was an invitation. She called Mr. Peterson. I'm not selling, she said. I'm moving to Meadow Creek. The reaction from her children and from Robert, her ex-husband, was a mixture of surprise and concern. Moving? Thomas Jr. asked, bewildered. To Meadow Creek. Mom, what's there? A community center, Eleanor replied, and people who need help. Robert called, his voice hesitant. Eleanor, are you sure about this? It seems rather sudden. Are you running away from things here? No, Robert, she said gently. I think for the first time in a long time, I'm running towards something. She packed up her suburban life, not without a few pangs of sadness, but mostly with a growing sense of anticipation. She kept her favorite books, a few pieces of furniture, photographs of her children and grandchildren. The rest she donated. The woman who arrived in Meadow Creek was different from the one who had left the city weeks before. Her clothes were simpler, her demeanor less formal, her heart a little more open. Moving into the small apartment attached to the hub was a revelation. Her days were suddenly full, not with the quiet rhythm of research, but with the bustling, unpredictable energy of community life. She learned the names of everyone who frequented the hub, listened to their stories, helped Martha with the literacy program, sorted donations for the food pantry with Brenda. She wasn't using her academic skills directly, but she was using her organizational abilities, her patience, her deep empathy for the human story. The most pressing need was the clinic. Eleanor wasn't a doctor, but she had always been a quick study, capable of managing complex information. She began researching rural health initiatives, telemedicine options, grant opportunities for community clinics. She organized the medical supplies, reached out to a network of retired doctors she found through her university contacts, begging for even a few hours of volunteer time. It was hard work, frustrating at times, but every small victory, a successful phone consultation with a specialist, a donation of medical supplies, a promise of a visiting nurse for a few hours a week, felt more meaningful than any academic publication ever had. Robert continued to call, initially concerned about her welfare, then increasingly curious about her new life. She shared stories of the hub, of the people, of the challenges and small triumphs. He listened patiently, sometimes offering practical advice from his business background. One snowy Saturday, he called. "I'm going to be in the area next weekend," he said. "Would you mind? Could I come visit? See the hub?" Eleanor's heart gave a little flutter. It was the first time he had suggested visiting her world. "I'd like that, Robert," she said. "Very much." Robert arrived looking a little out of place in his city clothes, but his eyes were full of a genuine, quiet interest. Eleanor gave him a tour of the hub, introducing him to the volunteers, the regulars, showing him the little clinic space she was working so hard to reopen. He asked thoughtful questions, listened intently, his usual professional reserve softening in the warm, informal atmosphere. They spent the afternoon together, talking not about their past, but about the hub, its needs, its potential. Robert, the engineer and businessman, started seeing things from a different perspective. He saw the need for better record keeping, for a more efficient way to manage donations, for structural repairs he, with his background, could advise on. "You know, Eleanor," he said, standing in the empty clinic room, "my company does pro bono work sometimes. We could look into getting you a proper electronic health record system, and I might know some people in the medical supply industry who could help with donations." Eleanor looked at him, surprised and touched. "Robert," she said softly, "you don't have to." "I know," he said, meeting her gaze. His eyes held a warmth that she hadn't seen in years, a reflection of the purpose he seemed to be finding in her world. "But I want to. This place, what you're doing here, it's important." That visit was the first of many. Robert began coming to Meadow Creek regularly, not just to see Eleanor, but to help at the hub. He used his business acumen to secure grants, streamline operations, organize volunteer schedules. He worked alongside George on repairs, brought his quiet efficiency to the food pantry, and helped Eleanor navigate the complexities of setting up the clinic. Working side by side, united by a shared goal that was bigger than either of them, the distance between Eleanor and Robert began to dissolve. They rediscovered the qualities they had admired in each other years ago. Her quiet strength and determination, his practical intelligence and unexpected generosity. The long conversations returned, not about the past or the regrets, but about the present, about the hub, about the future they were, unknowingly, building together. The Havenwood Community Hub began to thrive. The clinic reopened, staffed by a rotation of volunteer doctors Eleanor had recruited. The literacy program expanded. The food pantry served more families. The building itself was repaired and revitalized. One spring afternoon, sitting on the porch of the hub, watching children play in the small yard, Robert turned to Eleanor. "You found something here, didn't you?" he said softly. Eleanor smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling with genuine joy. "Yes, Robert," she said. "I found what was missing." He took her hand, a gesture that felt both familiar and new. "Me too," he said. I thought my life was set in stone, numbers and logic. But helping here, with you, it feels like I'm finally building something real. Their relationship, once formally ended, had quietly, organically begun anew. It wasn't the same as before, perhaps deeper, stronger, built on the solid foundation of shared values and purpose. They remarried a year later, a small, simple ceremony at the hub, surrounded by the community they had both come to love. Eleanor Vance, the renowned historian, was now Eleanor Sterling, the heart of the Havenwood Community Hub. Her life, once adrift, was firmly anchored in the rich soil of Meadow Creek, filled with the enduring warmth of human connection, the quiet satisfaction of making a tangible difference, and the unexpected beautiful second chance at love, found not in the grand corridors of power or academia, but in a simple building in a small town among the people who needed her most. The legacy she had inherited was not just property, but a life filled with unexpected meaning and purpose, a true fulfillment that academic achievement alone could never provide.